This is episode 22 of the History of Podcast. I'm Robert.
And I am Emma, and today we will be talking about the history of All Hallows Eve.
Now, first off, we have the card count, and we took a week off last week.
We did.
So we've had a little time for Ed card count to grow this week. It's 27.
Yes, we do have 27 egg cartons. So actually, Robert was talking about he's going to have to make a new a holder for all these egg
I put them on
cartons.
I turn the cardboard boxes into flat cardboard, and then I lean them up against, attach duct tape egg cartons to them, and then lean them up against the wall. But now it's just a bunch of random egg cartons all over the room. So I need to build another board for that, but I haven't had time.
Well, All Hallows Eve, if you haven't figured it out, pretty much the same thing as Halloween. And let me just give a disclaimer. I'm not the biggest fan of Halloween, and you can like or hate me for that. I mean, I have celebrated it, but it's just not my favorite.
As a little kid, but as you learn more about what it's about, I'm not a supporter of it.
I mean, I kind of celebrated last year, but this year I'm not the biggest fan.
Okay. Well, technically it should be pronounced Halloween.
Halloween.
Because it has to do with holiness, as we'll see. But yeah, it should be Halloween, not Halloween.
Interesting.
So, but Halloween comes from Pagan Origins, and going back to circa 3000 BC, the Celts of what is modern-day Ireland, Scotland, and Wales celebrated a festival called Samhain.
Now, Samhain is halfway between the autumn equinox and winter solstice. It marked the end of the harvest, the transition into the darker part of the year, the New Year's celebration, and the beginning of a period of greater spiritual activity. Now, let me give a disclaimer. Just because something says it's spiritual doesn't mean it's always good.
Yeah, and the pagans, they had a different calendar. It was actually based on trees. So their New Year was on November 1st, just the way that when you convert the calendars to our modern Gregorian calendar, that falls on November 1st of our calendar.
The festival started at the dusk of October 31st. So I guess their new days were a little off, and when days change a little different than what we do now. So the new day, November 1st, started at dusk. Everyone would put out their fires, and there'd usually just be one bonfire that would be lit at the top of a hill.
And the priests, or druids, would toss all the bones from their animal sacrifices. So the pagans did animal sacrifices. They would toss all the bones into this big bonfire. And this big bonfire, think of it, it was a bone fire. And that's where we get the word bonfire. It's like a shortened version of bone fire. So that's interesting. And everyone in the area would then take torches, light them in the bonfire or bone fire, and then take them home.
There were also jack-o'-lanterns at this festival, and I'm sure most of you know what a jack-o'-lantern is, and they carved the faces into turnips, though, not pumpkins, so that probably looked a little different. These carved turnip faces either represented spirits or supposedly warded off spirits. People also wore costumes of evil figures in order to scare off the spirits.
And quick interrupt, the reason it's called a jack-o'-lantern is there's the legend of Stingy Jack, and an extremely simplified version. So the story goes is a guy named Jack was a criminal in his town, and then he did some dealing with the devil and was doomed to roam the earth with only a carved turnip face lantern to light his way.
Interesting.
In other words, he was Jack of the Lantern, or Jack-o'-lantern.
Oh, nice slang we have there. I see. Jack-o'-lanterns have remained a big Irish tradition. They weren't common in America until a considerable number of Irish people immigrated to the U.S. Another semi-American tradition, not common until modern times, is trick-or-treating.
And trick-or-treating actually started with All Souls Day. We'll get to that in a moment. But in the Catholic faith, All Souls Day, you pray for the souls who have died and gone to purgatory. Purgatory is the waiting room before your eternal destiny. And by prayer, you would hope to shorten their time in purgatory, because you would pay for some of your sins in purgatory. And some kids and beggars in England tried to game the system. They went from door to door on All Souls Day and prayed for the dead with the families of these homes, and sometimes carrying turnip lanterns to light their way. That's interesting. So that's something that carried on. But after praying with the families, the resident of the home, the families would they would give either the beggar or the children something called a soul cake. And so that's the treat that you would get for going to someone's house. And the soul cake, it's like a spice cookie, sometimes with raisins, sometimes with a cross on top.
Okay, honestly, that sounds really good. I'm
Yeah.
down for a spice cookie.
There's like, I looked up soul cakes, and the first thing you get is just a bunch of recipes. But this whole practice was known as souling. And by the 1800s, souling became kind of an outdated thing, especially after the Protestant Reformation, as after England converted. And I know that was like hundreds of years after, but there were still Catholics hanging around. But once it was really Protestant dominated, this kind of became an outdated thing. But children still went door to door, singing songs or performing tricks. So it wasn't really souling anymore, but it became more of a secular practice. And going from door to door, singing songs, performing tricks, what they would get in exchange instead of a soul cake was they might get a soul cake still, but they could either get a piece of fruit or money. And now in America, like kids, they don't have to do anything for candy. We just get it.
Yeah, I mean, free candy. So just a quick point, trick-or-treating wasn't common until post-World War II because there was a lot of ration and such on sugar during the war. The comic Peanuts, hopefully you've read Peanuts, I love that.
Charlie Brown, yeah.
Yeah, Charlie Brown. Had one of the first documented popular mentions of trick-or-treating in the U.S.
And if you are wondering how Halloween acquired kind of a Catholic association, as I was mentioning earlier, so in the 7th century, Pope Boniface IV set up All Saints' Day, and that was originally on May 13th, but later on it got moved to November 3rd, not November 3rd, November 1st, in an attempt to outrule the pagan holiday, the Samhain festival.
The way it goes now is, and you may want to get out your calendars, but I mean, you do you. October 31st is All Hallows Eve or Halloween. November 1st is All Saints' Day, Hallow Mass, and Day of the Children. We'll get to that in a minute. And then November 2nd is All Souls' Day and the Day of the Dead.
And I do believe it's Hallow Mass, not Hallow Mass, because you don't say Christmas.
I mean, you can say Christmas. It's up to you.
It's Christmas, so Hallow Mass.
These 3 days collectively are known as All Hallowtide. Protestants don't really celebrate all that.
And lastly, we have Day of the Dead, which is most famously celebrated in Mexico, but also in other Catholic-dominated regions. And so it stems from All Saints' Day and All Souls' Day. So many of the Mexican rituals actually stem from Aztec origins of like human sacrifice and stuff.
Oh.
Of course, they don't do human sacrifice now, but death, like, it isn't really seen as a sad thing, and I think that's something that's a very secular way of looking at it, is death being seen as a sad thing, which I don't think we really should see it that way. But the way Day of the Dead goes, so the gates of heaven are opened on midnight, October 31st in the Catholic faith. So that's All Hallows Eve at midnight, October 31st. That's the beginning of the day of November 1st. And then for all of November 1st, the souls of deceased children can be with their families on earth. And then the adults get their turn on November 2nd. So then then I guess the gates of heaven are open for the adults on November 2nd. That would be All Souls Day. And in a way, the people who celebrate are supporting the souls on their spiritual journey. Remember, we talked about in the Catholic faith, purgatory, and how they had to pay for their sins with various torments and such. But people set up shrines and set out food, and it's not a sad holiday at all. Like, it's, even though it's associated with death, it's not really seen as a sad thing. And in effect, Day of the Dead is the Mexican version of what we know as Halloween. But the Twisted Holiday has evolved for hundreds of years, and it'll probably be different hundreds of years from now. This year is just a pin in time, and who's to say it's the end? Regardless, I hope Halloween doesn't get much worse, because I don't see it as a healthy thing. So, if you do celebrate, celebrate sensibly, will you?
All right, time to plug our YouTube channel and our Instagram. So please check us out on YouTube. It's also called The History Of. The link is in the show notes. And our Instagram is called The History Of Podcast, and that link is in the show notes as well.
If you have any questions or comments about the information provided in this episode, please contact us at thehistoryof365@gmail.com.
Have a blessed day, and you've got to promise me something. Never stop learning.